Hey everybody, this is Don again. It is time for episode 19 of Practical Reality. I am back in Donaldson Park in beautiful Highland Park, New Jersey, on the banks of the Raritan River. I'm actually leaning on a fallen log at this point in time on the shore of the river. The river has filled, it's dark and murky and muddy looking, but it still looks beautiful because it's full. And today's episode is going to be part 2 of what you should expect of yourself. If you recall, the main theme of last week's video was being gentle with yourself. I'm going to expand a little bit upon that today and then move on to some other topics that are related to the subject. And why do you need to be gentle with yourself? Because you are going to have problems. You are going to run into obstacles. This is not the slope of a straight line. This is a curved line with bumps and hills and that kind of thing. And being gentle with yourself means forgiving yourself, tracking your progress, and not letting yourself get down if you don't think things are going as well as they should be. So if you run into an obstacle or you're having a problem that you're having trouble dealing with, and you immediately begin to punish yourself to let that stream of negative thoughts overcome your reason, then that is what I consider to be a bad habit. And that's how we're going to frame this discussion today, in terms of bad habits and good ones. That automatic negative response, that flood of negativity that overcomes your reason, is a bad habit. And that's your ego holding you in place. Bad habits are easy to form because they are that automatic negative response that you just have inside your body when you can't deal with a problem and you decide just to put it off until later on and deal with it later. The only cure for a bad habit is to replace it with a good one. And a good habit requires consciousness. That's why they're much harder to form, because the ego is going to fight against that and try to reinforce the status quo and keep you right where you are, mired in that bad habit. Understand that even though you are alive and breathing and perceiving, it doesn't mean you are conscious. To be conscious is to be present and aware, and it's incredibly difficult to achieve a 24/7 state of consciousness. But the effort is worth the reward. Growth is uncomfortable, and if you want to change, it's better for you to be in charge of the change than to have the environment acting upon you and forcing you to change. And if you do have to change, you have to be accepting of that change and not fight against it, because that makes it far more difficult. I'll give you a real life example. Back in 2023, the beginning of 2023, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. I was quite afraid. I was very scared. I remember I have a friend, a Facebook friend, who's a doctor, a nutritionist, who basically outlined a whole new diet for me. And it was way, way different than what I had been usually eating. The things that I cut out were mostly carbs, pasta and potatoes and rice. And that stuff was a staple of my diet. So I cut out all those things and I substituted in things like quinoa and fruit and seeds and nuts and berries. And it was difficult for a while. As a matter of fact, in the beginning, she recommended that I eat cilantro, which I tried for like 1 week and couldn't eat more than once or twice. It was so horrible. I could not stand the taste of it. Even the smell of it made me sick and gag. So I had to go through some difficult change. But now I have accepted that change. And here I am 2.5 years later, pretty much free of that cancer. I would have to say I'm in remission. I have my PSA tests every so often, and the last one I had in November was 1.6. So I am extremely grateful for that. And that's very, very important to remember. Be grateful for everything that you have. And a good diet is just one good habit that you can form. Maybe you have a great diet already. You don't need to change a darn thing. That's great. I'd be very happy to hear it. But there are many other ways that you can form good habits. Ways to uplift yourself. Ways to relieve your stress. Meditation, of course, is just one. But my wife and I do other things together, like we watch nature shows, for instance. The recent program that's been on TV on NBC, The Americas, narrated by Tom Hanks. We have really enjoyed those programs. When watching that program makes you feel alive and grateful and glad to be conscious. And it's almost like sitting on the beach, that kind of show. When you sit on the beach and you feel, and you close your eyes and you feel the air and hear the waves, you can calm your mind down, get rid of that stream of thoughts for a few minutes, and begin to create space and make change, and you connect to the universe. And that becomes an incredibly important experience that can help you to, as I spoke about in the last video, engage the parasympathetic nervous system and get yourself out of the fight or flight response to be able to then make some real change in your thinking and plant the seeds of success and happiness in your subconscious. And I know this is another cliche and you've heard it before, but being happy is a choice. And to take that a little further, you have to be happy with what you have. If you're not happy with what you have now, you can never be happy, because that leaves you in a constant state of wanting, an endless cycle of frustration. Remember in The Silence of the Lambs, Dr. Lecter, when talking about Buffalo Bill, he says, "What does our Billy boy do? He covets." And what do we covet? We covet the things we see every day. So if you are looking at what your neighbor has, what your friends have, what you see on commercials, and thinking, I'll be happy then, when I have these things, when I go to these places, that's an endless cycle of frustration. That does not ever allow you to be happy or conscious. Because when you're in that constant cycle of frustration, your ego is in control, and you're not creating space in your mind to allow yourself to be happy. Remember, I mentioned in last week's video that I had the nurse practitioner come to my house and take my blood pressure, and it was 110/70, like the lowest it's ever been. And I credited that result to my spiritual practice. I was even surprised at that result. So to me, that is clear evidence that your body functions better when you are in a calmer state of mind. I'm sure you can recognize that as well. When you're rushing around all day, when you're constantly under stress, you don't function as well. You can feel your body is under stress. You know it's affecting the processes of your body. When you're in a calmer state of mind and you can actually slow that torrent of thoughts down and engage your parasympathetic nervous system, your body functions better. And that in itself is a benefit in the long run. Even if you don't feel immediately happy, even if you don't get exactly what you want at that moment, you still are on the right path as long as you are engaging yourself by entering that state of mind. And when you're able to achieve that calm state of mind, that's the time to start rehearsing your responses to stressful situations. Anger, for instance, is a completely reactive, irrational state of mind. So you know there are going to be times when you're going to get angry. How are you going to react? Are you going to, as my mother used to say, fly off the handle and get into a bad mood and damage the people around you? Or are you going to have a more measured, rational response that doesn't allow you to get into that negative, irrational state of mind? That takes practice. That's rehearsal. That is not easy to do. And when you are conditioned to be angry, or the response itself is conditioned on past experience, then it's incredibly difficult to recall the thought to try to rehearse a response. But if you rehearse the response ahead of time, then you are more likely to have a more rational response to your anger. That's just one example. Another example is life's little aches and pains. Everybody has them. I have some pain in my lower back that I've had for years. I've hurt myself at the gym before. I've hurt myself on the tennis court before. But do I sit back and complain about it? Do I dwell on that? Do I ruminate on those pains? No. I do my best to ignore them. Now, of course, there's a threshold of pain beyond which you can't ignore it. This depends on the severity of the pain. But I'm talking about little aches and pains that really don't matter that much, that you can ignore. And as long as you tell yourself that you're going to be fine, then usually you are. As long as you tell yourself that this pain is bad and is bothering you, and you let it bother you, the more often that you do, then the worse it gets and the longer it lasts. And you know, formulating these ideas does not happen immediately. I was having a little bit of trouble coming up with all of the subject matter for today's video. That's why I'm not here till 3:30 or 4 o'clock, because I took a couple of hours sitting alone in my bedroom thinking about exactly how I wanted to present this video, and I wrote everything down. So for you to actually have a measured, thoughtful response to a stimuli that normally makes you angry takes a process. Maybe you need to write something down. Maybe you need to record your voice telling you something. Maybe you need to have something somewhere that's like a trigger to offset the emotional trigger that normally makes you angry. if you rehearse that and you have a routine in place, then you can begin to replace the bad habit of the emotional, irrational response with a healthier habit that does less damage. You know, I watched a video recently on YouTube. I wish I could remember the creator's name, I forget, but it basically said that the universe itself is a conscious being. And we, as human beings, are receptors of that consciousness. Now, that's an incredibly powerful concept. If we are the receptors of that consciousness, then that means that we can be tuned in to that consciousness to make us aware of the possibility of a different response. So how are you going to handle that? How are you going to handle that realization? You can be not a programmed human being. You can be a human being that is the programmer of your own internal environment. If the universe is a conscious being, then that universe, in my opinion, has to be a benevolent force. Because otherwise, how would we exist if the universe was actively seeking to destroy us? The universal consciousness out there has to be a benevolent force. I believe that strongly, because otherwise I do not think we could exist. Now, I just had to move because the river was coming up underneath my sneakers and getting my feet wet. So I was not conscious of what was going on while I'm making this video. There you go. So what I would ask all of you to do is just consider the fact that you as a conscious being are the one in control, and that you can connect to the universal consciousness that is a benevolent force. And when you can do that, you become a calmer, happier person. And you can always, of course, seek out other people who feel the same way. There are a lot of people out there who are very cynical about this kind of thing. In the men's group that I lead, there are people who just will not believe for 1 second this kind of thought, this kind of philosophy, this kind of method of existence. They do not believe in any sort of spirituality whatsoever, and the vast majority of people think that way. But if you want to create real change and space in your life, then acceptance of this possibility is a very big step forward for you. And I would recommend everybody to try and do that and try and be more conscious, happier, and aware of the energy that exists out there, that has existed since the beginning of time, that makes all life possible, and that knows your state of mind and can help you achieve a greater, more peaceful state of mind. And that is what I would wish for everyone. And I hope that everybody takes something away from this video, tries to form better habits, tries to achieve a calmer state of mind, and understands that there will be bumps in the road, and is gentle with themselves to allow for problems to happen, but don't give up when they do. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please comment, subscribe, and like, and pass this along to someone you care about.